What are you going to do? Patient walks in with a $3, $4, $5, $6, $7,000 deductible. What do you do? That's a tough one. How do you figure out medical necessity? What is it that we're going to bill the patient? What are they responsible for? These are all really, really tough questions. Dr. John Davila here of Custom Chiro Solutions, and in this webinar that you're about to watch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over not just what to expect, meaning who's picked or how many people have picked what plans from the Affordable Care Act, but also how to deal with them, how to make sure that your care is not just medically necessary, but gets applied directly to what I would call their deductible as compared to the entire case, causing you on the backside to be responsible for things like wellness care that you billed to the insurance company just because you tried to help the patient. Well, let's get started. Thanks for watching. At the end, I'll come back and we'll talk again.
First thing I want to do is this. The issue that I have with a lot of webinars is that in the amount of time that we have, it's what I call too much information. And there are times when the information that you're going to go through over the course of an extended period of time, like in this for an hour or 45 minutes, whatever, can be too much. And what I mean by too much is you could actually be in one of those situations where it's maybe you're trying not to save one ball or two balls, but there's three balls. And really, when you get to this point where you're trying to make a save on all this on these balls coming at you, sometimes you get one, but you don't get all of them. And if you don't get all of them, and the whole context of the webinar is based on all this information, that's like me trying to throw one pen at you and you catch the pen, or a ball at you and you catch one ball, and I throw three balls at you and you only catch one, or you just don't catch any of them, basically is what happens. So today what I'm going to do, instead of rambling through in this 35, 45 minutes worth of information, running through 7 million things, today's purpose is very, very, very simple. Today's purpose is to give you information that you could use today. We're going to go through the 4 main things that you need to know when it comes to what's going to happen with these deductibles. What are the 4 main mistakes that people make that can cost you not just thousands, but also can cost you an audit or can cost you participation in some networks if you're involved in them. So today, it's about these 4 things. So here's the first we need to talk about. The first thing is this. What is the elephant in the room? A lot of people talk about the elephant in the room, and they want to talk about, how am I going to deal with these deductibles? And you know what? That is not the elephant in the room. We all know at times we have to deal with deductibles. We've been dealing with deductibles for years, and not just deductibles that have been going up, because I remember days of, $100 deductibles and $1,000 out of pockets and then 100% coverage. We're not talking about those types of changes. What we're talking about here is what are they going to go up to? The elephant in the room about this new care is really all about what's going to happen if we compliantly deal with how we collect this money. Because the most important thing is, what will the patient owe? What is it that the patient's going to owe based on these plans? Now, the reason why I say that is because what's going down or coming down the road is going to be monumental for us. You see, a lot of people have chosen different types of plans, and those plans that have come up with major deductibles. Now, the hospitals and the way they're looking at this is really important because they've seen uncompensated care rise to $46 billion. It's gone up 11.7% compared to the years before. It is skyrocketing. And with patients' deductibles going from maybe $1,000 or $2,000 to $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for a family, you're looking at the patient having more of their, their out of pocket be what you really be more than what they really think it's going to be. So what we want to be able to do is understand this in advance, because if we understand it in advance and we can go to the patient and explain to them exactly what it is that their insurance will cover, won't cover, we can avoid this all at the very beginning. Imagine running up to the edge of a cliff and trying to stop. because it's not going to work. You can't just stop. You try and stop, you will never ever just stop. You'll just keep going off the cliff. And if we don't handle this with the patients at the very beginning, then we're going to end up in a place where we never ever get closure with them and never move forward with them. So first thing I wanted to talk about is what are the plans and who's chosen what. Now this came out earlier this week from Chicago Sun-Times. This is the percentage of people that have chosen the different plans. Now I start with this because I want to get the most common plan, and obviously people haven't chosen the top plan, they haven't chosen the low plan. A lot of people have chosen the silver plan. So before I get directly into how to deal with the silver plan as an example, I wanted to show you the differences between all four plans. Now the first plan here is going to be the platinum plan. If you look at the red shaded area, it's going to be that the patient pays 10%, the insurance company pays 90%, and the deductible for family is $698. Deductible for an enrollee, for one person, it's going to be $347. This is the old school white elephant. Oh my God, I can't believe I found one of these. If you found one, these people are probably, paying quite a bit of money for this care. This is going to be extremely expensive. Now, that's just one of them. The next one is going to be the gold plan. Now, the gold plan is going to be a traditional 80-20 plan, basically what we've seen in the past, for $1,200 for a person or $1,300 for one person, and between $2,800 to $3,000 for a family. Now, remember, these are just averages that we found from Chicago Sun-Times. Now, the next one is the silver plan. Now, look at what most people have chosen. They've chosen a 30-70 plan or a 70-30 plan with a $3,000 per person or a $6,000 deductible per family. That is big money. And then on top of that, the annual cap for out-of-pocket is going to be $6,000 for an individual. That would be $6,000 out of their pocket. And for a family, for it to cover 100%, is going to be $11,500 out of pocket. Now, for a bronze plan, which is the second most, it's $5,000 per person and $10,000 per family, with an annual cap out of pocket of $12,600. So these are their plans, and this plan here for the bronze is 60-40. So this is the second most popular plan that people have purchased because these have become so expensive. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. Now, the question, now that we've set the stage of what the plans are, the question I get is, well, what am I doing with these patients? How do I deal with them? Now, this comes right off the government's website, and this is how you and your insurer share costs. Now, it's no different than what we've looked at before, but I wanted to put this in here to make a very, very, very specific point. If you look on the far left, it says Jane hasn't reached her $1,500 deductible yet. Her plan doesn't cover any of the costs. Office copay, Jane pays $125, her plan pays $0 because she hasn't reached her deductible yet. Once her deductible is reached, then she has copay. The office visits $75, Jane pays 20%, they pay 15% of that. The plan pays $80, it's $60, no problem. Once she's reached the out-of-pocket limit, whatever the costs are, according to the in-network plan, it's $200, Jane pays $0, her plan pays $200. That's very, very typical and very, very normal compared to what we've been doing over time. So we all know that this is the way the game is played, okay? Just so we know, that hasn't changed. But the question is, or the mistake that we make, is how much are we billing to call it deductible, or to actually bill towards the deductible? Now, this is the face of someone who walks in with insurance. Hey, look at me. I haven't had insurance in forever. I'm finally paying for it. And this is great, isn't it? Woohoo! I've got insurance. Look at this coverage. I've got all this coverage. And then all of a sudden you read them and go, yeah, but you also have a $6,000 deductible. So all of your payments have to be made before your insurance kicks in. And I don't know if people have really made that distinction yet, but these are things that you have to make sure that you explain to people in advance. So what I want to do is explain one of the biggest things that I've seen, and this happened the other day with a client of mine. He calls me up and he says to me, hey, listen, hey, John, I have this family. They've been patients of mine for years. They're coming in today, and they just switched over to the new plans from the exchange. The problem I have is that they used to have a $300 deductible per year, and now they have a $3,000 deductible for the family. So my question to you is, can I just create a care plan of 41 visits for the family and bill it to the insurance company? Do you think that makes sense? And I told them, I said, listen, here are two things that you need to worry about. The first one is, if the patient's in wellness care here, and this is January 1st, and the new deductible starts here, my question to you is, why are you now billing insurance? Why are you billing insurance now? Why are you saying that all of a sudden this is active care? Because now you're going to have to try and, in order to help the patient, quote unquote, help the patient meet their deductible, you're going to have to lie and say this care here was medically necessary before they came into a new active care condition. He goes, but I've done that for years. I go, I understand that, but the problem that you created for yourself is that you've told the insurance company, because you did it for everybody, that every one of your patients fell and hurt themselves in some way, shape, or form on December 31st. Now, this is the profile that's happening. Now, the problem that I see coming down the road isn't that people have done this in the past and they're going to get in trouble in the past. That's not the problem. The problem that I'm seeing moving forward is that now that these health plans are not just regular insurance anymore, because they are mandated by the federal government, we're going to see a lot more oversight about things like this. Or the next thing you're going to see is this. Well, here's a 48 visit plan. Here's 24 visits here and 24 visits here, and you're going to try and bill all of it to the insurance company to help the patient meet their deductible. Because of the oversight, you're going to see a lot of people in this new situation get looked at as far as what they've been sending to insurance companies for deductible. So if we go back to my client, what I told him was, I said, listen, can you really tell me if your patients need 41 visits? He goes, oh yeah. I said, great. Who were the two children? He goes, they're 12 and 10. I said, do you think a 12 and a 10-year-old under medical necessity rules really do need 41 visits when they haven't had a complaint and been in wellness care the entire time? He goes, oh, I never looked at it that way. And I understand that, because in the past we've just been going along, but just understand these new health plans are going to be looked at much more closely. So what I decided to do was go look for these terms. So you can actually find this manual from the federal government. It's out there, and it's a glossary of health coverage terms. So we know what the coinsurance is, but I wanted to read one thing out of here. Your share of the cost of a covered health care service calculated as percentage, right? As a percentage, for example, 20% of the allowed amount. So not everything you're going to send them is going to be related to the patient's coinsurance. And also, don't forget, not all of it's going to go to deductible. So you have to understand how that works. And in addition, what is the allowed amount? The allowed amount is the maximum on which a payment is based for covered health care services. So remember, active care, or if we use a Medicare term like AT, if we're talking about active care versus GA wellness care, right? We know that this would go into the allowed amount, and this one would not. And if we're talking about regular insurance, active care would, and then wellness would not. So just understand that this care would go to insurance and to be covered and to be allowed, but wellness would not be. So just understand that when you set these care plans up for patients, that we're looking at only this component actually going towards deductible and coinsurance. Okay? So if we were to look at this plan, okay, if we were to create a silver plan, we'd say, okay, silver plan deductible, let's say we did some care here, 36 visit plan, we did some active care, we had a day one services, we had active care, and we go through all this here. let's say the allowed amount was $70 for something, and for the 12 visits that we billed here, it would be $13.77. The total amount of charges that we created for this patient would be $20.66 because we didn't have any write-offs yet. But only charges allowed to go to deductible would be $14.47. So what that means is that there is an issue with what is medically necessary. Now, if you notice on that last page, we talked about a 36 visit plan, but we only billed 12 to insurance because it's all the patient needed. Now, medically necessary services, here's the rub that we have. In this new Affordable Care Act, the definition, this is what we have for medical necessity. Healthcare services or supplies needed to prevent, diagnosis, or treat an illness, injury, condition, disease, or its symptoms that meet acceptable standards of medicine. Now, before we get into, well, I don't practice medicine and I'm not a medical doctor, I get that. Let's just understand that this term means that they're only going to pay for services based on some definition. And what I've read is that this definition, because it's not that well defined, is going to default back to guess who? CMS, which equals Medicare. And because it equals Medicare, what we're looking at here is the old definition of medical necessity. Now, that's what I've read in legal opinions. People can obviously go, can go back and try and work this over to try and, challenge it in court or whatever they want to do. But that's what's out there. This is the definition of medical necessity right now in this new Obamacare plan. So that means that what we're looking at down the road is really just an open idea of what insurance companies want to use. Now, I'm going to assume that since everyone thinks that Medicare is the most restrictive, that that's probably a good definition to use. So what I decided to do was go ahead and give you a graphic to take a look and see, and this is what we talked about with my client the other day. We wanted to talk about the difference between what would be clinically appropriate care and removal of a subluxation that causes a functional deficit, right? That's what we're trying to get to with these patients, that are we removing a functional deficit? Well, maybe we are, maybe we're not, but that's our goal. So remember, during care, we're looking at this, a subluxation is present, that's why we're adjusting. And if that's the case, we're all good. We're finding the subluxation, we're adjusting them. The state boards are going to leave us alone because as long as we have rationale to go ahead and adjust, not a problem, okay? The question is, does the care meet a level, based on our documentation, that we're saying that we actually fixed that functional deficit? So not just are we doing it here, we know that if we're not meeting that functional deficit that we're trying to get to here, we have to get it here. So this definition that we're talking about in this graph here is really the difference between, yes, there's a subluxation both present, but how come this adjustment didn't reach up to here? And the answer is that we didn't have a functional loss. That, function and necessity, these things are required. So it isn't just, clinically appropriate care that's going to go to these deductibles. It's actually only the part that you bill to insurance, not the part you bill to the patient. Okay? So just understand that's what we're looking at. So when I explain this to my client, he's like, oh, okay, no problem. And now he's beginning to get it. Now he's beginning to create these care plans for his patients where only this is going to go to deductible. Now, the reason why it's important is because in that 36 visit plan that we talked about, we had over here 24 visits that were going to go to wellness care. And because we can't bill that, and it's clinically appropriate care, because we're not going to bill this to the insurance company, it leaves us with an idea of what we're looking at when we're going to come across these silver plans. Now, what we're looking at here is this. Okay? We're looking at the silver plan deductible on average being $29.07. The total medical necessity of all the charges we put together was $20.68 before write-offs. Now, the allowed amount, including what's medically necessary in the plan that we showed you earlier, only came out to $14.47. Wellness care was $1,200. So the in-network, if you were in-network, you would take this number and go over here and say this is the in-network. So for their initial care, how much is insurance going to pay out of this? The answer is zero. They're going to pay $0 out of this plan. Because of this, only $14.47 is actually going to go to deductible. And if you were out of network, which a lot of providers I know are, you would take this and this together, and that would be what the patient is, because you're not going to be able to write. You shouldn't be writing off the amounts that are the difference between what the insurance should pay versus what you're charging. So this is what's going to come down with these silver plan for these deductibles. These people for initial care plans are going to have a lot of money that they're going to owe you out of pocket. Now, what we worked on with my client was, how do we deal with this with patients? How do we make care affordable? And those are really, really important questions, because what he's looking at here is, wow, this is really putting a lot of weight on my patients, because 80% of the patients are going to have deductibles between 3 and 5%. $3,000 and $5,000. But here's the good news. There is a silver lining here. Now, in the past, insurance companies have had deductibles where, let's call it a deductible plan. A deductible would look like this. It would be, let's see, $3,000, but they'd have a separate deductible over here that was zero. Now, what that means is, in this deductible over here, in the old plans, this deductible would be zero, because it would be for things like advanced imaging or emergency room or specialists that had a different deductible than the regular plan. Well, guess what? In this new version, all of this has gone away. Everyone's going to pay this, whether they're getting MRI or they're going to the emergency room. This is their deductible. They're going to have to come out of pocket with it. So now, what we've created here is almost a level playing field. So the patient can come in and go, well, I don't know, I should talk to my MD and get an MRI. Well, that's fine, you can do that, but you should know that the majority of our patients get better without it. And MRI is what's going to happen. You're going to pay $1,000 for an MRI, and at the end of the day, you're going to still have to come back and get treated. So wouldn't it be better to go ahead and try this first? Because in the past, that wasn't the case. They could go get the MRI and pay an advanced imaging copay, or go to the specialist, go to the emergency room, and not have to pay the full deductible. So now this is almost like a level playing field. So no matter what happens, they're going to have to meet this deductible before they do anything else. All right? So let's get on to the next part. And this is what your position should be in dealing with this. Now, in the past, I've heard this story told before that, we're like a square peg in a round hole, and the insurance companies just beat us up with this, and they're just trying to make us and treat patients their way. Well, I want to tell you right now, that is not the case. That is not what's going on, okay? I don't want you to think that. I don't want you to go in that direction. What I want you to understand is this. We are in charge of the situation. And the reason why I say that is because if we were to say that the patient needed the square peg, like this is what the patient needs to get to ideal functional wellness, and there was a big square peg, and then we just said, listen, Mrs. Johnson, this is what you need compared to what your insurance covers, which is this little round hole. Now all of a sudden, fitting the square peg in the round hole takes on a different meaning. The reason why I say that is because who drives the situation is not the insurance company. You see, you need to drive the situation. You are the hammer here. And the reason why I say that is because you're the one who's going to be telling the patient one of two things. Either we practice medicine here or we don't practice medicine in my chiropractic office. Meaning, we treat you based on the subluxation and what you need to get to ideal functional wellness, or we just treat your symptoms based on what the insurance company allows. And it's totally fine. You choose. I don't care which one. But if you're talking about ideal functional wellness, you can't bill it all to the insurance company. And the reason why I say that is because the pieces that get sloughed off to the side or shaved off to the side when you force this round peg through, the square peg through this round hole, is what the patient's liability is based on the contract that they've signed with the insurance company. Now, here's the good news. The good news is this applies to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a cash practice or not a cash practice. The reason why I say that is because if you say, well, I'm a cash practice, I give my patients super bills and they get reimbursed from the insurance companies, the good news is that once the patient sends the super bill into the insurance company, they get reimbursed. You're now responsible to give information to the insurance company to back up your claims. So there really isn't a true cash practice unless you're not giving a super bill. But remember that picture of the happy patient with insurance. They're going to be happy to use it, especially if they're paying big money for it. So just be prepared for that conversation, okay? So when we look at this, you say, well, John, where does this all, where does the audit come from then? Or where does the problem come from? The problem comes from when the patient's liability, all the little pieces that get sloughed off to the side, when the doctor picks them up and tries to put them down the hole. That is the part that we run into that creates the audit for us, because they can see this. Now, just a word of caution, we'll talk a little bit about this in March. With ICD-10 coming down the road, these codes are extremely, extremely telling. They are very, very descriptive. They can tell us anything that we're looking at as far as cares, what care is going on, how long it's been, what the condition is. They can track this stuff better than they could with ICD-9. So just understand the ability for them to track what we're doing is going to be even more focused on what we're doing, even better than it has been in the past. Okay? So remember, we want to make sure that we portray the exact vision of what it is that we're doing for these patients. We don't want to be a kitty and look like a lion. We don't want to change this. This is what I call my Match.com slide. We don't want to, put a different picture out there. Like what I'm saying, you finally get on Match.com, you look at a picture, you go, wow, she's beautiful. Then all of a sudden, you realize that it's a picture from 1989. You're kind of disappointed. The insurance companies are going to do the same thing. What you send them on a claim form is going to make them excited to see exactly what you are. And if it's not exactly what you sent them, the portrayal of what you sent them, it's going to be a problem. That's what audits are going to come from. This is what's going to happen down the road. So, I understand we want to try and help patients, but you got to be very, very careful because we have to be able to practice compliantly. Now, that leads us to the next part, which is how do we make care affordable? That's the important part. That's the part that we're coming across with patients paying a lot more for their coverage. And then, what are they going to pay to us? And then having more out of pockets. They're going to pay more for the coverage and have a higher deductible. So just understand there's a couple things that go with this. Now, mistake number two, this is important here, is very, very important that you don't break this. Because remember, we talked about all this care now being, mandated under federal law. Understand it's free and the OIG. Free exam, consultation. Please be very aware of what the government says about free. Well, I'll just make the exam and exam consultation free, or exam and x-rays and all this other stuff exam. Just understand what the government says. So this comes from the Office of Inspector General. If you read the highlighted part here, it says, okay, I'll just read this to you real quick. It says, for purpose of the section of 1128A of the Act, of the Social Security Act, it defines remuneration without limitation, waivers of copays and deductible amounts or any part thereof, and transfers of items or services for free or other than fair market value. What they're saying is remuneration, meaning giving someone something for free or less than fair market value, is a violation. Because if you read just above it, it says here, a person who offers or transfers to a Medicare or Medicaid beneficiary, or since this is federal now, we can extrapolate this out, the selection of a particular provider, practitioner, or supplier of Medicare and Medicaid payable items or services may be liable for civil monetary penalties of up to $10,000 for each wrongful act. Now, this is important to understand. So free exams and x-rays, be aware, because this is coming. Okay? This is coming. I just saw someone earlier last year get a long jail sentence in Ohio for bringing people in with free exams and x-rays and then overbilling their insurance. So they're going to be looking for this. So just understand this is what's going on. So we want to stay away from this. Now, the realization is you can do this. There are ways you can actually charge people a fair fee and still get paid, and then do it compliantly. Because we don't want to do is try and help patients and have the insurance companies come bother us because we tried to help patients. We have to make sure that we're protecting ourselves first, okay? That's number two. Mistake number three, okay? Really, really important, okay? And this comes up quite a bit. I had a client the other day come to me and go, hey, listen, I just bought this. What do I do? How do I make it compliant? Now, Groupon, or what we call deal a day, is not one of the most compliant situations out there. In fact, a lot of states have gone to them, a lot of state boards have said this type of marketing is illegal. Now, the Office of Inspector General also has an opinion on this, and my answer to the client was, can you get your money back? Because what I've seen here is not very pretty. So when we talk about deal a day, sites, like Groupon or deal a day, the doctor pays for advertising on a per click or per purchase basis. Okay, it's not a cap fee. It's all based on how many people buy their deals. Now, it seems harmless, but there are a few things you got to remember. Okay, first one is, on the surface, it looks like a great deal for the consumer, great idea. In addition, remember, some states have done this, but unfortunately, it looks to trip the Office of Inspector General's wires on possible overutilization in services, since the patients are prepaying for these services. Now, the reason why I say this is because the client that I had just before that, or actually the last 3 clients I've had when they've been dealing with this, have all had the same problem. And the problem is, the patient comes in, the doctor says, well, you don't need x-rays, or, I don't think you need this. And the patient says, well, I bought, these services. I want these services. I want, everything that you sold me in this Groupon. I want the exam. I want the consultation. I want the 4 x-rays. I want all this stuff that's included, and the 5 adjustments, and a partridge in a pear tree. All this, I want it all. And when the doctor says you don't need this, the patient gets upset. And 2 of the cases, this is no lie, 2 of the cases, the patient has gone to the Better Business Bureau or the State Board of Examiners saying the doctor sold them something and never delivered. So just understand, when the patient buys something, this is the reason why the OIG has issues with it. The patient buys this package, they don't need it, but you give it to them anyway, that could be overutilization. Also, the state board's looking at this because of that same issue. Now, here's your reference, okay? The OIG, Office of Inspector General's advisory opinion from November 5th of 2008, so they were writing in response to someone asking for an opinion on a pay-per-call or pay-per-lead advertising business, okay? They've asked about this. Is it okay? And this is what they found. Payments to the advertising company may not be based on the volume or value of referrals to or business generated by either party for other party for which payment may be made by a federal health care program, okay? So just understand that when you're doing this and you're seeking a referral and you're trying to pay for these services, it's a bad thing, okay? So just understand that's one of the issues. So when the board, that's why a lot of the boards are coming out saying this is not good. Plus, don't forget, there may be an issue that I have yet to see people really get into, which is this thing called fee splitting. You're saying that the exam and x-rays are worth X and you're paying someone a portion of that money and they're keeping it, and then the patient's paying the full amount, but you're splitting the fee for them to send patients to you. So just understand that these are some of the issues that are coming down the road when you're talking about some of these advertising ideas. Now, lastly, mistake number 4, okay? This is the big one. This is the one I see all the time, and that's called time of service. Now, this is Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail. He finally finds it. He thinks he finds it. Now, if you go back in the movie, you remember every time he thinks he finds the Holy Grail and gets his hands on it, it's one of those things that it never is quite there. You never can say, oh, yeah, I got it. What do I do here? Oh, man, I finally got it. What's my next step? And then what happens at every turn? At every turn, something happens and it falls away and it goes away. Now, this has happened numerous times with time of service discounts. Happens all the time. I cannot tell you where this is. I've in the past felt like Indiana Jones looking for the Holy Grail. Who came up with this? Where did it come from? I've looked for years trying to find this time of service discount. And the problem that I have, to me, is that it's the Holy Grail. If we could find it, life would be simple. The problem is I can't find it. And every time I latch onto something or come up with something, it's not quite what I'm looking for, or it changes. Now, I know where people have thought they've seen it before, and in the OIG back about 4 or 5 years ago, they came up with this thing for discounts for federally insured patients. Now, HHS, Office of Inspector General, given its approval in the past for a hospital or healthcare system's plan to offer prompt pay discounts to patients who pay their share of their medical bills quickly. Now, people say, well, if you're paying it quickly, everything else, they tried to extrapolate this out. The problem was that the hospital system had asked for the OIG's opinion on whether it would violate the anti-kickback statute, or what we were talking about, the opinion from the OIG for gifts and inducements, right? For rewarding patients, for referrals to offer patients the incentive to pay their medical bills quickly. The system feared that they'd be seen as inducing patient self-referral, meaning the patient would come to me as compared to a different hospital because I wasn't making them pay their full amount. Here's the problem. The problem is, yes, that did happen, but you had to do a few things first. There were 3 key points, and I'm going to give you the third one. That the patient had to agree to care first before you offered the discount. That's the first one. 2, which is kind of important because most people don't do this, the discount must be related to actual cost savings. Now, a hospital has a lot more cost of running the practice than a regular just a small single chiropractor or even a dual provider facility. So when the hospital created this policy, they said, well, we'll give anywhere from 15 to 20% off. They actually did the math and showed that the deduction off what the patient owed was legitimate based on what they actually were saving. The other part was that it was applied to what the patient's copay was after the patient accepted care. So when I did this for clients in the past, because you could extrapolate this out for chiropractic offices, the average savings in a chiropractic office was around 3 to 6%. Plus it was based on when they paid you and how much they paid you. So when you looked at all these things together, the majority of my clients never implemented this because it was just too much work. And plus, if you're saving 3 to 6% off a Medicare copay of it's $34 for 98941, for example, and it's an 80/20 plan, and it's, the patient's met their deductible and you're paying $6.80, 6% of $6.80, was 40 cents is what they were saving. It just wasn't legitimate. And then the Holy Grail component of this was, hey, listen, I found this thing on where a hospital gave 20% off, so I'm going to give 20% off. No, that's not how it works, because that wasn't exactly what your savings was. So just understand, this is just the four main mistakes that we make. And I wanted to go through this today because there's a great new option I found out. It's called Clear Gauge. Look it up online. It's unbelievable that you can get patient financing without a credit check for the patient. And also you can go look at compliantcoupons.com. There's an actual way now to give discounts without actually having the patient have to buy into a DMPO or discount medical plan. Those are 2 of the options.
Need to find more solutions? No problem. We have tons of places on the web that you can find free information about how to deal with these issues. First one, look us up on Twitter at JDavilaDC. If you're on Facebook, Helping Chiropractors Do the Right Thing, go there, like our page, and you'll find tons of free information and articles about compliance and how to make your life a million times easier. Also, if you're on YouTube, go ahead, search us out. Look up Custom Chiro Solutions, and you'll find tons and tons of videos, even how we customize EMR systems to make you not just more compliant, but faster and more profitable. Once again, thanks for watching our video on the Affordable Care Act and the high deductibles that come with it. Now, what we're doing is, if you'd like to have a free 30-minute compliance consultation, make sure you're doing these things correct, give us a call, 1-800-974-3479. Dial extension 2 and ask for Stacy. We'll make sure to set you up with a free 30-minute assessment to see if you're doing everything correct. Once again, 800-974-3479, extension 2. I hope to talk to you soon.